My boss fired me after 15 years, but I knew it beforehand. They had no idea what was coming. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. I still remember that morning like it just happened. It's strange how some days blur together, but others burn into your memory like they never want to leave. 15 years, that's how long I gave to that company. 15 years of my life, my time, my energy, my loyalty. I was never late, never called in sick unless I really couldn't move. I stayed behind when others went home, finished what they couldn't, smiled when I was tired, and believed that hard work meant something. For so long it did. Or at least I thought it did. I was proud of what I built there. I started small, just a quiet girl behind a desk, answering phones, filing papers, helping wherever I could. And slowly, people started trusting me. They'd come to me for help, for advice. I wasn't the loudest or the smartest, but I cared. Maybe too much. But lately, something started to change. I could feel it before I could explain it. It was like walking into a room full of whispers that stopped just a second too late, eyes that looked away too fast, smiles that didn't reach the eyes anymore. You know that gut feeling when you realize something's off, but no one will tell you what it is? Yeah, that's what it was. At first, I ignored it. Told myself I was overthinking. Everyone goes through changes at work, right? Maybe management was just restructuring. But then, one morning, I came in early, like always, and my access card didn't work. I laughed it off, thinking maybe the system was down. But when I tried again, the little red light flashed. Denied. I went to IT. The guy there, someone I'd chatted with 100 times before, wouldn't even look me in the eye. He just said, "You might need to check with your manager, Alic." His voice was flat, like he'd rehearsed it. I remember walking away with my stomach twisting. When I got to my desk, the emails were gone. My name wasn't even on the list for the weekly meeting. And when I looked up, people I'd worked with for years, people who used to eat lunch with me, laugh with me, they avoided me like I'd turned invisible. It's a strange kind of pain, you know, when you're still there but it feels like you've already been erased. That afternoon, I was called into a meeting. Just me and my boss, the same man who used to tell me I was the backbone of the team. He wouldn't even look at me properly. Just shuffled some papers, cleared his throat, and said the words that still echo in my head. "Your services are no longer required." That's it. 15 years, gone in one breath. I didn't cry, not then. I think I was too stunned to. I remember just nodding, standing up, and walking out. Everything around me looked the same hallway, the same lights, the same smell of burnt coffee. But it all felt different. Like the world had shifted a few inches to the side and left me behind. When I got home that evening, I sat in my car for almost an hour before going inside. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. My mind kept replaying everything, every late night, every missed birthday, every moment I'd said, "It's okay, work needs me," and now this was my thank you. But here's the thing, and this is the part they didn't know. I'd already sensed it was coming. I could feel it weeks before it happened. The subtle changes, the sudden distance, the strange tension in the air. And I'd started watching, listening, noticing. There were documents I wasn't supposed to see, numbers that didn't add up, emails that mentioned adjustments and budget redirections. And I knew something was wrong, something big. So before they could lock me out, I made copies. Every report, every message, every file that hinted at what they were doing. I didn't even know what I'd do with them yet. I just knew I couldn't let it disappear. That night, sitting in my car, I opened my laptop and started reading through everything. The deeper I went, the colder I felt. They weren't just cutting jobs, they were hiding things. Transferring money. Signing off fake accounts. People higher up than I ever imagined were in on it. And when I realized what they were doing and how they were using people like me to cover their tracks, I felt something inside me snap. They thought they could just erase me, but they didn't know me at all. I took a deep breath and looked at the files spread across my screen. My reflection stared back at me. Tired eyes, messy hair, a woman who had nothing left to lose. That's when I made my decision. If they thought firing me was the end of my story, they were wrong. It was just the beginning. Because I wasn't just going to walk away quietly this time. Not after everything I'd seen, not after everything they'd done. And I promise you this, they had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with papers and flash drives scattered everywhere, the glow of my laptop turning the room a cold blue. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge. I kept telling myself to stop, to just let it go. But every time I closed the screen, I saw their faces. Their smug smiles, the way they had looked at me like I was disposable. 15 years, gone with a single line in an email. I went through every file slowly, breathing hard. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Contracts rewritten to hide money. Employees cut so bonuses could be moved to consulting accounts. False signatures. People's lives torn apart so someone at the top could get another car, another vacation house. I remember my hands shaking as I clicked through folder after folder. It wasn't just numbers, it was names, people I knew, friends, coworkers, people who'd been let go just like me. And suddenly, all the little odd moments from the past months clicked together. The hush when I entered a room, the quick glances, the fact that the new manager had arrived just before the layoffs began. I felt sick. All the years I'd been proud of my job, proud of the company, proud of being loyal. I'd been helping build a machine that chewed people up and spat them out. By 3 a.m, I'd packed everything into a single folder on a flash drive. I zipped it into my jacket pocket and sat back, staring at the dark window. My reflection looked like a stranger. Tired, angry, scared. But under all that, there was something harder, a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. I had proof. I thought about just sending it anonymously to the press. I could disappear. Start over. Pretend none of this ever happened. But every time I tried to imagine that future, I saw the same thing. Them doing it again. Someone else sitting at the same kitchen table, scared and broken. Someone else being erased. No, this had to stop. So I planned, quietly. I made copies, printed key documents, sent the drive to a trusted friend out of town, just in case something happened to me. It sounds dramatic, but in that moment, it felt like I was stepping into a fight I couldn't back out of. The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy, the kind of sky that feels like it's pressing down on you. I showered, dressed, and drove to the building one last time. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I had no badge, no job, no right to be there. But I walked in anyway. The receptionist looked startled. "Alic, too? You're not supposed to," she began. But I kept walking. Down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times, past the photos of smiling executives, past the people who pretended not to see me. I went straight to the conference room. They were in a meeting, my former boss, the new manager, and a few others whose names were all over the files I'd collected. They looked up when I walked in, their expressions a mix of confusion and annoyance. I didn't speak right away. I just placed the folder on the table and started laying out the papers, one by one. Email printouts, bank statements, contracts. My hands were steady now, like all the fear had burned off in the night. My boss stood up. "Alic, you can't just sit down," I said quietly. My voice didn't even sound like my own. The room went silent. I slid the last document across the table. "I know what you're doing," I said. "I have everything." Someone at the far end reached for their phone, maybe to call security, maybe to call someone higher up. But it didn't matter anymore. I'd already sent the whole folder to a journalist the night before. This meeting wasn't about threatening them. It was about looking them in the eye while the mask fell off. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not safe? Calm. They tried to smile, tried to say it was a misunderstanding, tried to use the same smooth voices they'd used in every policy change meeting. But nobody in that room believed it anymore. The papers were too clear. The truth was too big to cover. I turned to leave. My boss said my name once, softly, almost like a plea. I didn't turn back. The walk out of that building felt like walking through a storm. People whispered, phones flashed. Security stepped aside, unsure what to do. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear. Every step felt heavier and lighter at the same time. When I reached the front door, I looked up at the sky. The clouds had cracked open, letting a pale beam of sunlight through. It touched my face, and for the first time since this started, I took a full breath. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe they'd come after me. Maybe they'd deny everything. Maybe my life would get even harder before it got better. But I knew one thing. They couldn't erase me anymore. I had spoken, and when the truth finally hit the world, it wouldn't just hit them. It would show everyone exactly what kind of system we were living in. One where quiet people like me are silenced, exploited, and discarded. But not this time. Because this time, the quiet girl had the evidence. And she wasn't going away. I thought I'd feel relief walking out of that building. I thought maybe I'd get into my car, drive home, and finally sleep. But that's not what happened. As soon as the doors shut behind me, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers, emails popping up faster than I could read them, messages from coworkers, some I hadn't spoken to in years. They'd seen, they'd heard. They wanted to know if it was true. By the time I reached my car, there were already 2 missed calls from a reporter. Somehow, the story had moved faster than even I expected. The journalist I'd sent the files to had wasted no time. The first article was already up online. My name wasn't in it yet, but it was only a matter of time. I sat behind the wheel, engine off, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it could hold me together. I wanted to cry, but nothing came. It was like my body was frozen between fear and adrenaline. I knew what I'd done was right, but I also knew what people like them could do when cornered. On the drive home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting a car to follow me. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach flipped. Was it a threat, a warning? When I pulled into my driveway, I saw my neighbor staring at me from across the street. She gave me a small nod, like she knew something had happened but didn't dare ask. I walked inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. The TV was on in the living room, and there it was. My company's name scrolling across the news ticker. Phrases like financial misconduct and massive investigation flashing under the anchor's face. I turned the volume down, but the words still rang in my head. My phone rang again. This time it was a coworker, someone I'd mentored years ago. She was crying. "Alic," she whispered. "Thank you. We all knew something was wrong, but we were scared." Her voice cracked. "You're brave." I hung up and stared at the wall. Brave. That wasn't what I felt. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, waiting for the hit. That night, I didn't sleep again. Every sound outside made me jump. The files I'd sent to my friend were my only safety net. If anything happened to me, at least someone else had the evidence. The next morning, the news had exploded. My name was out now. Photos of me walking out of the building were plastered online, my face blurred but recognizable. Reporters camped near my street. Someone left a note on my windshield. "Stop lying. No signature." For a moment, I thought about backing off. I thought about calling the journalist, saying I wanted to stay anonymous. But then I remembered the faces of the people they'd fired. The quiet ones. The ones who'd never had a chance to fight. This wasn't just about me anymore. By the second day, the company released a statement. "We take these allegations seriously." It began, the usual script. But I could see the cracks forming. Their lawyers were scrambling, their social media pages flooded with questions. People who'd worked there before were coming forward, sharing stories, confirming mine. It was bigger than me now. And yet, inside my little house, I felt smaller than ever. Every ring of the phone made my heart jump. Every shadow outside my window felt like a threat. My hands shook when I made coffee, when I typed emails. I kept thinking about the moment in the conference room. The look in my boss's eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear of losing everything they'd built on the backs of people like me. On the third night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "We know what you're doing." No message inside, just those words. I sat there staring at it for what felt like hours. I'd known there would be consequences, but seeing it written out, cold, simple, made my skin crawl. But underneath the fear, something else was growing, a kind of fire I couldn't put out. They wanted me scared. They wanted me silent. That was the whole point. I shut the laptop and stood up. My reflection in the window didn't look like the same quiet girl anymore. She looked like someone who had finally seen the truth and couldn't unsee it. I thought about my parents, about the lessons they'd taught me. Keep your head down, work hard, don't make trouble. For years, I'd lived by those rules, and where had it gotten me? Erased, betrayed, used. Not this time. The next morning, I did an interview on camera. My face was blurred, my name hidden, but my voice was clear. I told them what I'd found. I told them how they treated me. I told them how they'd treated me. I told them how this wasn't just numbers, it was people, families, lives. And when it aired, something shifted. Strangers started sending messages of support. Former employees reached out with their own evidence. Other companies started being named. It was like a dam breaking. For the first time since that awful day, I felt something close to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could actually make a difference. But hope is a fragile thing, because even as the story spread, even as people rallied around me, the threats grew louder. Anonymous calls in the night. Cars idling outside my house. The sound of footsteps when I went to get the mail. I kept my curtains drawn, my lights low. My friends told me to stay somewhere else. But I couldn't run. If I ran now, it would mean they'd won. And I couldn't let that happen. This wasn't just about exposing one company anymore. It was about showing the world what happens when power goes unchecked. About how easily people can be silenced. About how injustice doesn't always look like a headline. Sometimes it looks like a contract, a smile, a signature on a paper. And maybe, if enough people heard the story, it would stop someone else from sitting at their kitchen table one night holding evidence, wondering if anyone would believe them. That's what I told myself anyway. That's what I whispered in the dark when the fear got too big. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. They weren't just fighting a quiet girl anymore. They were fighting the truth, and the truth has a way of breaking through. The fourth night was the worst. I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. For a split second, I thought it was just a dream. But then I heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the back door. My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone, but my hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I dialed 911, whispering into the receiver. Someone's in my house. The dispatcher told me to stay quiet, stay on the line, stay hidden. I crouched behind the couch, holding my breath, listening. The sound moved closer. A creak on the floorboards, the faint sound of something brushing against the wall. It felt like the walls themselves were breathing with me, and then, silence. The kind of silence that hurts your ears because your heartbeat is too loud. Minutes felt like hours. When the flashing lights finally painted the walls red and blue, I almost cried with relief. The officers searched the house. Whoever it was, they were gone. But the window was shattered, a single shoe print on the floor. They told me it might have been random, maybe a break-in gone wrong. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't random. This was a message. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the police station, staring at the report in my hands. My name, my address, attempted break-in, no suspects, no leads, just another line in a file somewhere. But while the police had no answers, the media was blowing up. My story had gone viral overnight. The video I'd done, the one where I told my side, had been shared thousands of times. People were angry. They were talking about corruption, about injustice, about fear. And the company? They were panicking. I could see it in their statements, the sudden shift in tone, the careful choice of words. First denial, then confusion, then silence, until the press conference. They held it 3 days later. My former boss stood behind the podium, his tie too tight, his face pale. I watched it on my phone, sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store. He said my name. He called me a disgruntled employee, said I'd misunderstood the company's financial system, that I was misinformed. It was almost funny, almost if it didn't make my stomach twist in knots. But the thing he didn't know was that I wasn't watching alone. The journalist who'd first helped me had been digging deeper. And right as he finished speaking, the network cut to breaking news. Documents, emails, recordings, proof. Proof that everything I'd said, everything they'd tried to bury, was real. In that moment, sitting there in my car, I felt a wave of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Vindication. My hands covered my face and I just sobbed. Not out of joy, not really, but out of sheer release. It was over. Or at least, I thought it was. Because that night I got another email. No threats this time. No words. Just a photo. Of me leaving my house that morning. The caption underneath, "You can't hide forever." I remember staring at that picture for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. Were they watching me? Was someone close to me feeding them information? Fear started to creep in again. The kind that doesn't shout, but whispers. So I packed a bag, just in case. I didn't know where I'd go, but I couldn't stay there anymore. Not alone, not when I didn't know who to trust. The journalist offered to help. Said I could stay in a safe location until things calmed down. So I went somewhere far from home, far from the noise. A small cabin outside the city, quiet and hidden. The first night there, I sat by the window, watching the trees sway. The air smelled clean, like rain. For a moment, I thought maybe I could finally breathe again. But even in the quiet, the thoughts wouldn't stop. I kept replaying everything, the years I'd spent in that company, the people I'd tried to help, the look on my boss's face when I'd handed in my resignation letter. I thought of my younger self, so eager to please, so desperate to belong. If I could talk to her now, I'd tell her, belonging means nothing if you have to lose your voice to keep it. The next morning, the journalist called. "Alic," he said, "you need to see this." I opened my laptop. My heart pounded as the video loaded. It was footage, leaked from the company's own servers. Conversations, documents, voice recordings, everything. My story wasn't just one voice anymore. There were dozens. People who'd been silenced, just like me. The truth was out. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the turning point. The company couldn't hide anymore. Their leaders were being investigated. Some arrested. People were talking, not just online, but in the real world. News outlets were calling it the Rose effect. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I hadn't set out to start anything. I just wanted to tell the truth. But the truth had grown roots, spreading farther than I ever imagined. Still, even as I watched the news and saw the impact, I couldn't shake the fear. The car that slowed outside the cabin at night. The sound of a branch snapping too close to the window. The messages that sometimes still found their way to my phone. But this time, I didn't feel powerless. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I was fighting. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever been told to stay quiet, to endure, to be grateful. They thought they'd ended my story when they fired me. But in truth, that was where it began. And as I sat there, The dawn creeping through the trees, I whispered to myself. You tried to silence me, but you forgot. I already knew what was coming. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. But now it was on my terms. And this time, they had no idea what was coming next. It's been months now. Sometimes I wake up and still expect to hear that same click of my office ID card, the hum of the elevator, the faint chatter of people pretending everything is fine. But those days are gone. Now, my mornings are quiet. No deadlines. No fake smiles. Just me, a cup of coffee, and the sound of wind brushing against my window. You'd think peace would come easy after everything. But peace is strange when you've lived in fear for so long. It feels borrowed, temporary, like it could vanish if I breathe too loudly. After the investigation, everything changed. The company collapsed faster than anyone imagined. Executives resigned. Some faced charges. The news ran story after story, each one exposing another layer of rot hidden beneath years of silence. They called it a scandal. For me, it was something else. It was survival. People kept saying how brave I was. Alic, you changed everything, they'd write. But bravery doesn't feel like how they make it sound. It doesn't feel like standing tall or speaking loud. Sometimes it feels like shaking in the dark and still saying the words anyway. It feels like crying while hitting send. It feels like walking into the unknown because the truth deserves to be seen, even if it costs you everything. Some nights, I replay it all. The meetings, the lies, the fear in my boss's eyes when I handed over the evidence. And I wonder, did he ever think about me after that? Did any of them? Or did they just move on, like they always did, pretending people like me didn't exist? But even if they forgot, the world didn't. Every week I get messages from strangers. People telling me their stories. Stories of betrayal, of injustice, of being silenced. People who say they watched my video, saw my face, and realized they weren't alone. And maybe that's what this was all for. Maybe I didn't lose everything. Maybe I traded comfort for truth. And that's a trade I can live with. I've started volunteering now. Speaking to young women, especially those just starting their careers, I tell them the things I wish someone had told me. That their worth isn't defined by who signs their paycheck. That silence isn't loyalty. That courage isn't something you wait to find. It's something you build, one decision at a time. But I won't lie, it still hurts. There are nights when the quiet feels too heavy, nights when I wonder if I made a mistake. If maybe keeping my head down would have been easier. But then I remember the people who couldn't speak, who didn't get the chance to fight back. And I know I couldn't have lived with that kind of silence. A few weeks ago, I got a letter. No name, no address. Just a single line written in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for not staying quiet." I sat there for a long time holding that note. It was simple, but it felt like closure. Maybe not the kind you see in movies. No grand moment, no perfect ending, but real closure. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from the past and start walking toward what comes next. Sometimes people ask if I'd do it all over again, knowing what it cost me. And I always pause before answering. Because the truth is, it cost me a lot. My career, my safety, my peace. But it also gave me something I didn't have before. Purpose. You can rebuild a life. You can't rebuild your soul once you sell it to fear. And that's what I tell them. Because this story, my story, it's not just about one company or one woman. It's about all of us. About the lies we let live because we're too scared to face the truth. About how easy it is to lose yourself in a world that rewards silence. I didn't start this to become a headline. I started it because I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt like your voice doesn't matter, hear me now, it does. It always has. The truth is messy. It's terrifying. It doesn't always make you a hero. Sometimes it just makes you human. But that's enough. Because every time someone tells the truth, no matter how small, the world shifts just a little. And maybe that's how change really begins. one voice at a time. I still don't know where my life is heading next. Maybe I'll start over somewhere new. Maybe I'll write about what happened. Maybe I'll just keep telling stories, not because I want attention, but because stories are how we heal. What I do know is this. That day they fired me. They thought they were ending my story, but they were wrong. They were just turning the